In this talk we want to look at the classical approach to management theory. The classical perspective to management emerged during the 19th century and continued into the 20th century. So it's quite an early runner in this field. It's the I suppose the word classical suggests that it's got a long pedigree. Due to the new challenges that organizations faced, management sought methods of efficiency which included a rational and scientific approach. So back in the 19th and early 20th centuries, industry was developing. The Industrial Revolution, which really started in England back around the late 1700s, difficult to put a time period on it, that had picked up pace throughout the 1800s and into the 1900s. Early parts of the 1900s were still developing, but what was required was some view of how management should act and respond, and some theory of management to explain what is best practice and how should management work. So the classical approach was a response to this. This is where it came from. So we will look at management practices within an organization. And the three approaches to classical management are the scientific management, the administrative principle, and bureaucratic organizations. So this classical view can be viewed with three components, three aspects to it. They are separate, but there are three parts, early parts to management theory, really. And we'll just skip over for these in the coming few slides to give you some appreciation of what they're about. So it has the following three theories, and we will look at those in turn. So the first one to look at is Scientific Management by Taylor, Frederick Taylor. Now, to give you a quick version of this, well, scientific management, or Taylorism as it's sometimes called, was a scientific method which was used to optimize the way in which tasks were performed, thus improving the labor productivity. Scientific management was measurement. It was calculation. It was timing. It was watching the worker perform a particular task and seeing if there was a better way of doing it, taking timings so that precise measurements could be taken as to how long a task took and what was involved. So it was a much more scientific approach to management. One of Taylor's philosophy was, in the past, man must have been first. In the future, the system must be first. Sounds a bit harsh, and I don't think it's a sentiment that many people would support today. But at that time, these people were experimenting with ideas, experimenting with ways of doing things. So the world was changing very, very rapidly, and they must have had a response to it. So Taylor saw the system, the organization, as having requirements, and the system employed people. So people should put the system first, not themselves. It was the team that was important, not the individual. So the general concepts of scientific management, well, develop a standard method for performing a task and train workers to do those tasks. It's very, very simple. Break the tasks down into very small parts and get workers to perform those tasks over and over again, so the workers became extremely fast and skilled at performing those functions. And if all the tasks were done in the same way, then the throughput would be much greater than if workers had been very generalized and done many tasks. It was a view that was looking at the human condition as a part of the production system. People were seen as part of the production system, and performing the same task repetitively over and over again is very dehumanizing. So it wasn't a good way to work, really. It was quite harsh on the workers. Obviously, the workers would have to be given the proper tools and training to give them a fair chance, and they would have to have incentives to work. Also, the employees would have to be selected for particular tasks. They just couldn't be picked randomly and given a task. The task would have to be studied and have to be matched against the abilities, skills, aptitudes, personality of workers. So there should be a correspondence between workers and tasks. And wage incentives were provided when output increased, so that workers were not paid, let's say, per week or per month. They were paid per output, and that gave them more incentive to work. The disadvantages of scientific management, well, the workers were just part of the overall production system. They were not valued as people. They were not valued as individuals. They were valued as cogs in the machine, cogs in the wheel that were turning the machine. They were treated like machines almost. It was their function to be productive and to turn out output. The workers were confined to that task. There was no initiative required. There was no development of the individual. They simply worked repetitively at that particular task, which was sad. Workers were not allowed to form innovative ways of performing their tasks. You couldn't vary the system. It was very difficult. They were trained to do it in a certain way, do this particular task in a certain way. They operated in that way, and if they come up with some good idea, it might be accepted, it might not, but generally speaking, they didn't have time to think anyway. All their working life was programmed. So it's a very dehumanizing approach to work. There were other developments that were put forward by other people, and you'll see in the literature as you work your way through this particular work on scientific management or on the classical system. I said there were three right back. The next one was Fayol. Fayol in 1925, he died. He developed the administrative approach. This theory dealt with the entire organization, workers and management, and had four basic principles. Now, the four basic principles are unity of command. Now, by unity of command, we mean each person receives orders from only one superior. So there's no conflict. There's no ambiguity about what is required. That one worker reports to one superior. There's a division of work, specialization and efficiency, were incorporated. Now, division of work is an old-fashioned economics term. It's been around since we got onto the planet as sentient human beings. But division of work is sometimes referred to as the division of labour, and it's been written about throughout history. It was popularised by a very famous Scottish economist, Adam Smith, in 1776 in his book called, well, the brief version is called The Wealth of Nations. But essentially it bubbles down to breaking tasks up into very smaller tasks so that workers could build up an expertise in doing those particular tasks. It is dehumanizing to a large extent, because the individual's working life becomes a very, very small task which is done repetitively. And that's the same as we met when we looked at scientific management earlier. There's unity of direction. Related activities were grouped under one manager, which makes sense. The manager would probably have an expertise in looking after a particular function. If similar functions developed or were broadly in line with that one, then the chances are they would take on those functions as well. And there's something called a scalar chain, the organizational structure which starts from the CEO to the labor. You can trace it all the way back. You can start at the top and work to the bottom, or vice versa. There's a route through the organizational chart to show that. Now, according to this view, the administrative view, there are 5 functions or elements of management. The first one is planning. Clearly, the business has to be planned. The way forward has to be planned. It has to be organized, otherwise there'll be chaos. So there must be organization. It must be controlled. As it changes and as it develops over time, it has to be controlled. It can't get out of control. Out of control is not good. It means the business can enter into a chaotic downward spiral and end itself. It must be coordinated. All the different functions must be coordinated to get a single output, or a single unity of effort to get a single outcome. And that single outcome must correspond to the corporate goal, whatever the corporate goal was or is. And there is something called commanding. It sounds very authoritarian, but you've got to have somebody who says, we got to do the following. Now can you and you do it, please? And it's got to be somebody who's directing, who's commanding. The word doesn't sound very nice, but it still means that the work has to be done. And the work has to be pointed out to people so that they will do it. And there are other people who developed this, which again you will meet as you read your way through the literature. It crops up in many of the books and in much of the notes that we supply. Bernard is quite a famous one. He crops up quite a lot. Okay, going right back again, I said there were 3. We've looked at 2. We've looked at Fayol, and we've looked at Taylor. Now the last one to deal with in these sessions is the work of Max Weber, and this is the bureaucratic organization. He concentrated on the fact that positions should be structured where there must be a clear line of authority. So he was concerned with the hierarchy. Now, he's developing a bureaucratic view of the organisation. Sounds bad to us because bureaucracy has come to mean something pejorative. It's not a good term. It means unnecessary paperwork and unnecessary officialdom and waste of resources caught up in endless unnecessary meetings and that sort of thing. So Weber didn't see it that way. Weber said as bureaucracy was necessary, it was a desirable thing, providing it's efficient, because it shows a clear line of authority. And the persons must be selected by competence for the job and promotion. So the promotion is based on achievement, and a specialist division of labour develops. So the people who are promoted are not friends of the boss, friends of the manager. The people who are promoted are the ones who are best for that particular task, who have an aptitude, who have qualifications and skills in that area. And there was a formal structure. It was well understood. Everybody knew what the structure was. And providing they knew what the structure is, the best people were in the hierarchy doing specialist functions. And as long as there was a clear line of authority through the organisation, people knew who they were reporting to, then, according to Weber, this would be an efficient organisation. Let's look at some of the views and misconceptions. Well, good bureaucracy removed or reduced opportunities for corruption, favouritism, and arbitrary exercises of power. So instead of bribing some single person, you'd have to bribe the whole organisation, which could be difficult, if not impossible. So it wasn't the individual that was important, it was the whole bureaucracy that was important. And it was difficult, according to Weber, it would be difficult to cut off one section and corrupt that one section. So in terms of dealing with corruption, this would be a good organisation, according to Weber. The trouble with it is that paperwork generates paperwork, and eventually there are forms for everything. Then the forms need filing and processing, and sometimes the information collected is not necessary, and people are wasting time filling forms that are not going anywhere or doing anything. So the system may not be that good. Generally speaking, we associate this with large organisations. Small companies don't have time to develop bureaucracies. They're too busy making the product, trying to sell it and trying to survive. Big organisations, where there is what we call slack in the system, when there is slack, then bureaucracies tend to emerge and develop it. And many large organisations suffer from this problem. Managers try to have managers under them, if they can, to try and bolster their own position. We sometimes think of bureaucracy and the civil service, government organisations. But actually, bureaucracy can happen anywhere. It can happen at universities or colleges or schools. It can happen in factories, and it can happen in consultancies, even where people are aware of bureaucracies. They can develop anyway. Somebody thinks that a particular function is required. They need a new small department. That small department will need a manager. The manager will need to have forms and regulations, and then there'll have to be a manager above that manager. And after a while, there is a bureaucracy. And once a bureaucracy develops, it tends to sustain itself. It's very difficult to unwind it. Its radical pruning of a bureaucracy is a problem. The workers are resisted, the managers are resisted. Winding it back is a problem. So, we've looked at three types of classical view of management. Fayol, Taylor, and Faber. Now these will come up again in your reading and in video format. It's important that you understand the three of them and what they're about, what they're saying, and what their particular perspectives are. But as far as this particular class is concerned, we've come to an end. So, thank you for watching.